Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to the very first live recording of the Nonprofit Activator podcast, where I will be amplifying the good work that nonprofits are doing all across the country. But this one is different, okay? I am specifically focusing on new and super small nonprofits because they're often the ones that don't get a lot of visibility and support. So every month, you're going to join me right here on LinkedIn. I'm going to be lifting up the stories of extraordinary nonprofit founders and how they are changing their communities. And I don't know about you, but I am just so tired of the negative stories we hear every single day. But now it's time to focus on the good. So, with that, I'm going to share some information about my very first guest. He is Gerald A. Moore Sr. with Mission Fulfilled 2030. I'm going to bring him up, but I'm going to share a little bit about him as he comes up on the screen. So he is a phenomenal, hey Gerald, he is a phenomenal, engaging speaker who uses his story as an at risk youth to inspire and also motivate underserved students. So Gerald talks about his story because he was a low achieving student, right? And he went from there to working for some of the top consulting firms in the world. He also uses his experience with racism in corporate America as a diversity and inclusion speaker, focusing on how to discuss race in the workplace. But all of that experience, him being a graduate of Norfolk State University, his 20 years being a federal government contractor as an information technology and cybersecurity engineer, whew, that was a lot. All of that experience is what he used to create Mission Fulfilled 2030. And I would say all of that experience brought him to this very moment right now where he is impacting 100,000 Black boys. So I want you guys to welcome Gerald Moore today. He is coming to the very first episode. Let's give it up for Gerald. Welcome, Gerald.
Tiffany, thank you so much. Thank you for the warm introduction. I am super excited to be here on the inaugural episode of the Nonprofit Activator podcast. I'm
Let's
super excited.
go.
I'm super proud of you too, because I'm watching you. I'm watching how you move. I'm watching how you're interacting and letting some folks know that these micro organizations like mine, because Mackenzie Scott let me know that I am not a small nonprofit. She let me know that I am a micro
Mm.
nonprofit. Thank you, Mackenzie Scott. But we're gonna get to you. We're gonna get to the point where we
Gerald,
can be
he's starting
considered a
already.
small nonprofit at $1 million. Like we gonna get there. We're working on that.
Right. He's starting already. I already know how this is going to go based on his first, the first thing he said, but it's true, right? So that's why I made the point in the beginning, right? So super small. I don't know how I feel about micro yet, but we're on the same page. Like there are organizations that are less than 500,000, less than 200,000 that are doing really good work. And we need to hear about that, right? So that's why I wanted to bring Gerald to the stage because y'all need to hear his story. So let's start there. Tell me about you. Tell me what inspired you to create Mission Fulfilled 2030.
Tiff, thank you. Great question. Um, Mission Fulfilled 2030 goes back to my youth, right? When we look at what's happening in inner city communities with young Black males today, many of us, and this is me, this is my story, had my first police encounter at 12. I got expelled from school at 14. I did the
Mhm.
Scared Straight program in Rochester, New York at 15. I
Mm,
fathered my first child at 17, right? So from that point, failure was written all over me.
mm,
Failure was written all over me. But what people did not know was the ingenuity of the things that I was doing as a little boy. I
mhm,
built my first system or my technological thing at 10,
mm,
right? I was reading engineering books at 12. When I got expelled from school, the only reason I did not get fully expelled from school was because when I met with the superintendent, my ninth grade entering year, they wanted to expel me from school. We had a new superintendent. The superintendent is looking at my record as my
mm.
middle school administrators are saying we need to get him as far away from a school building as possible.
Yeah.
The superintendent said, "Has anybody looked at Mr. Moore's test scores?" Mr.
Mm.
Moore is testing at 12th year, 10th month in reading, math, and science. He's at the 98th percentile in New York State tests for all students. We're not
Wow.
kicking this kid out of school. It's definitely not an education issue that you guys are having. But for me, I never had a black male educator,
Mm.
never. K through 12, never had a black male educator. I grew up in a blue collar city in Rochester
Mm-hmm.
where my outlook was go work for Kodak or nothing. And all you needed to work for Kodak was a high school diploma. My
Yeah.
mother was the oldest of 9. My father is the middle of 13. I'm a first generation college graduate. I didn't know anybody who was going to college. So grades really didn't mean that much. My parents knew I would work. They knew I could read. They knew I was educated, right? And that was it. Nobody had gone to college.
Mm.
One of the reasons I knew I could go to college was I was an all state football player. I did my best work during football and basketball season, but I started
Mm-hmm.
getting recruited to play football. But my senior year, my son was born. Not only was my son born that year, when he was 3 months old, I ended up with full custody of him. So
Wow.
I knew at that very moment, the baseline that I set for him would be the trajectory for his life. And I grew up with some young men that weren't always on the right path, but a lot of them were super smart.
Mm.
So I had an opportunity to go to college that year. We had the first HBCU conference in Rochester, and it
Mm-hmm.
just so happened I was introduced to the HBCU. Now, I graduated with a magna cum laude 1.69 GPA. Like
Wow.
I had a I had a top D average, right? And you're not getting into anybody's engineering school or computer science school with those grades.
Mm-hmm.
But Norfolk State gave me an opportunity because they had an open enrollment policy at that time. And that's the benefit of the HBCU. So I was able to get into Norfolk State and test into their engineering department. So that's how I was able to start on an engineering track and really change my life. Like there were these different bumps in the road that gave me opportunity to actually change my life and
Mm.
get out of a community where there was a lot of violence. By the time I was 18, 19 years old, I knew personally about 10, 15 boys that had been murdered before they were 18 years old.
Wow.
Um, I got into this in the Scared Straight program. There was a young man that really was impactful on me in the Scared Straight program. I'm talking to this young man who recognized me from playing football. And at 20 years old, he told me his life was over. He told me he didn't believe that he had anything for the world that he could achieve as an individual. And he got out of jail, and 3 months later, he was dead at 20.
Mm.
So there were things like that where I've really decided that, hey, Gerald, I value my life. I want my son to have another opportunity. And that buckled me down. And when I got to Norfolk State, for the first time, I had a black male educator. Now, I had a father at home, and I call my father beautifully flawed. My
Mm.
father taught me a lot about what I should do, but he showed me a lot of what I shouldn't have done, where he struggled with drugs and alcohol. He was a hardworking man. I know that my father loved his children. He worked very hard for us.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what I was doing in my neighborhood was trying to be my father. Right?
Oh.
My father was into some stuff. He was respected in my neighborhood for some of the things that were not conducive for me in my adolescence and just trying to be on the right road. So
Mm-hmm.
when I look back at all of those things that happened to me in my life and being able to go into corporate America and go from being a D student to a six-figure earner, I was like, all of my friends could have done this. So
Yeah.
how do we go back into my neighborhood and neighborhoods like mine and change the vision and change the narrative of who black males are? And
Mm-hmm.
that was the basically the foundation and through my son of what Mission Fulfilled is becoming.
That is, first of all, that's amazing. And I just want to acknowledge like the power of your story. Um, and I'm reflecting on the word encounter. You had all these like encounters along the way that helped shape you into who you are now. Like that superintendent or the person in the school who said, "No, have we looked at his test scores?" Right? Like if it wasn't for that encounter,
Absolutely.
if you hadn't gone to that college fair or seen like the possibilities, if you hadn't encountered other people with their negative trajectories and it impacting you in a positive way. And so I love how that connects to the mission that you're doing because you are the encounter for these young boys. Like you
Exactly.
are the vision for what they can see their life can be. When
Exactly.
unfortunately, like that young man you talked about, he didn't have that vision. He didn't have anyone to show him. And you are that now for those boys. I just think that's amazing. And I just want to stop first and just say thank you for having the strength and being able to even talk about it openly and being vulnerable to share the realness and the rawness of your story. So,
And for a long time, I wouldn't, because in
mm,
the corporate side of everything, Gerald's a thug on that side. Gerald's background, my
mm,
background, if people knew my background prior to getting an opportunity to meet me, a lot of opportunities that I've had, I would not have.
yeah,
Like when I first went public with Mission Fulfilled, like it became a major issue at my current employer at the time. When I launched my book, Motivate Black Boys, that became a major issue with my
mm,
employer. Motivate Black boys. Why just Black boys?
mm-hmm,
Right? That actually became a thing, which is sad,
yeah,
right? Because Black males make up less than 5% of the high tech and STEM workforce. Black men make up less than 2% of the public school workforce. And as I mentioned, it's highly likely that a majority of Black males will go their whole K through 12 experience
mm,
without a Black male educator. Many of them coming from single parent homes, which are women. So many of them will never have an educated Black male in their pathway. And then we look at what's happening in our school systems. So, and
yeah,
that's where Mission Fulfilled comes in. And we can come in and after school programs and provide these young boys with a foundation and Black male mentors, one, not only that are educated, but are technically savvy. Because when
yes,
we look at what's going on in the world today, we have a technical future that we need to prepare our young boys for. And one can think it just like me, 1.69 GPA. Who's letting me in their computer science or engineering building? Nobody.
that's
The
true.
majority of Black boys today, we have a 50% graduation rate. And out of that 50%, on average, we see students.
Mm,
But through Mission Fulfilled, we getting our boys technically ready. And the young men that come through our program will be college ready and work ready.
I love
And
that.
that's what we do. We may have some boys that go on to college. Fine. They have the aptitude. We pushing them to college. But some of them don't want to go to college, but they want to be able to have jobs where they can take care of their families.
Right.
So we making sure that they're certified. And we
Hmm.
have a new certified Black boys initiative where they coming out of high school with certifications that they workforce ready.
I love that. And I actually want to piggyback on that and connected to what you were talking about with not wanting to share your story and feeling like you're showing a side that people wouldn't understand in corporate America. Why is your organization different? Right? Like why is it different? How do you stand out from the other organizations out here doing similar work?
Oh, one, because it's visible and we're actually doing the work. Right? We're actually doing the work. Like you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. And whether
Hmm.
we have funding or not, the work continues. Right. I had a gentleman ask me, I was invited to speak at an organization who also they were doing work, mentoring work for older boys like juniors and seniors.
Hmm.
And I was invited to speak at their organization. And one of their board members, white guy, approached me and he was like, "Man, I was doing some research in your organization and you're doing awesome work. Like, I see that you're based in Virginia, but you got work going on in Rochester, you got work going on in Chicago, you got work going on." And he asked me, he said, "What's your budget?" And I started laughing. And he was like, and I said, "Listen," I said, "I'm a startup nonprofit. We
Hmm.
don't have a budget. We
Hmm.
have whatever the people support us with." He's like, "How are you doing this work?" I was
Hmm.
like, "With love and faith."
Hmm.
I was like, "First of all, I love my people. I love what I do. And I have faith that people, places, and circumstances will be placed on my behalf to intercede and help us do what we need to do. So
Mhm.
all I really needed to do was just start working. So when I started working, things started to move. People started to support. So I said, I got a board and we're working on building a budget. We have this fictitious budget that's out
Mhm.
there in the air of what we would like, but that doesn't stop us from working.
Mhm.
And that's what sets us apart. Like an organization may say, we don't have the budget to do this. That doesn't exist for Mission Fulfilled. We
Mm.
work. We work. I
Right.
go out, I find people who believe in the mission, who believe in the vision, and we work.
And let me even ask you, particularly around Black boys, like how is your organization able to impact Black boys specifically? And I want to connect that to your story because I recognize you want to reach 100,000, right? And a lot of organizations struggle with that. A lot of organizations struggle with getting people to come and take their services up or even having impactful programs. And I see the work that you do every day. And if you're not on Gerald's LinkedIn, you need to tap into his LinkedIn. He is doing the work, just like he said. But I want you to kind of lift up like why, particularly for Black boys, are you different?
Um, let's go back to the hood. I'm from the street.
Hmm.
I'm from the street. I ain't afraid of no troubled young man. I'm not
Hmm.
afraid of walking up to a group of young men on the street and presenting them a new opportunity of what success could look like.
Hmm.
Right? I know my young men are in schools, schools are struggling, and I present to them that I have a new opportunity to help your young men. Like in a out of school program, schools are so restricted in what they can do.
Mm.
And as a cybersecurity engineer, because I have children, I always went and volunteered with schools and things of that nature, right?
Mhm.
So the schools that I was able to work with get an opportunity to have a cybersecurity engineer in front of their young men.
Mhm.
Most young men, when I go speak to these schools, the vision of a cybersecurity engineer is a white man.
Mhm.
Therefore, the belief that I can even achieve that is minimal. First of all,
Mm.
I got to try and figure out how to graduate from school. I got to figure out how to undo all of the damage that had been done by the time I get to middle school because like I said, most young boys have never had a black male educator where they can look out and say, "Man, I can at least be him. I can at least be Mr. So and so who was teaching me in middle school science. I can at least be that."
Yeah.
So getting out there, interacting with people firsthand. Yeah, I'm the founder, CEO, executive director, first line of defense. I'm out there, and that
Mhm.
kind of and that's not for long term. That can't be the model. But
Mhm.
as a small nonprofit,
Gotta
it's
do what you
what's
gotta do.
moving us right now. It's moving us right now. And that's what separates many small nonprofits because most of them were started from the vision of their personal experience.
Mhm.
So no one can do it like them. Like no one can do it like me. You can go and teach tech and STEM, but you can't do mission fulfilled because I am mission fulfilled. Right?
Mm.
If you want to do a thing, you must become the thing.
Mhm.
If you want to do a thing, you must become the thing to be able to execute it at its highest level. And that's what
Authentic.
we're doing right now.
Mhm. Well, let me tack on to that because I feel like sometimes major donors and funders, they make a lot of assumptions about new nonprofits or small nonprofits. So I want you kind of like we're going to take back the curtain on that right now. I want you to talk about one thing you think they often get wrong about new and small nonprofits.
I think they underestimate the founders,
Mm.
right? Because they tend to have a model of if you're applying for a grant, there's a model and processes that they've put in place that don't consider the founder or the origin of the nonprofit.
Mm.
So if I'm applying for a grant, you can't just put me in the pot with all the others without considering one, my background. I
Mhm.
got 20 years experience as a federal government contractor and leader.
Mhm.
Like my whole career has been based on putting together SOPs and processes and leadership.
Mhm.
So if you're not considering my ability to lead this organization and you're just looking at me as a startup founder, you're being inconsiderate of who I am as a leader, one,
Mhm.
right? And you haven't totally vetted me outside of my work. But
Yeah.
then you look at who I am as a founder and you see them doing great work, you can't just place them independently because I've had foundations say, "Oh, you're doing great work, but you're a young nonprofit." Yeah, but as a leader,
You have
I'm
20
more
years.
senior than everybody on your staff.
Exactly.
So that doesn't actually work, right? So you're not taking advantage of someone who could really use you as a catapult to the work that you want to do,
That's
right?
right.
So I have this
Mhm.
work that I'm doing, but you say you have work that you would like to see done, but you're eliminating some of the best people to do it.
Mm.
And they come from the communities that they serve. So if you're disrespecting someone who started a community program that has been working and all they need is someone to step in and intercede on their behalf to
Mhm.
potentially change a whole community on a technicality of your processes.
I love that. I love that. I wanna talk about that right there because I think just like you're saying, Gerald, people make the assumption that because your processes aren't necessarily in place or you're super new, right? Like your financial infrastructure isn't as strong where you need it to be, somehow that's a reflection of your lack of impact.
Right.
But they're not directly connected to each other. Like it's important to be transparent as an organization and have the right processes in place for like to be fiscally sound, but that doesn't mean you can't make an impact, and that doesn't mean you can't get there when you get resources to be able to strengthen your infrastructure. So it's
Exactly.
almost like a chicken and an egg, but what funders really want to accomplish, you have it. You have the skill
Exactly.
set, you have the answer, and I often see that disconnect, right? And we could go off all day on this, but I love how you answered it. So like if you were a funder, like how would you support new and small nonprofits? What would you do?
One, I would vet the founder. Like whose vision is this?
Mhm.
Whose vision is this? I will evaluate the work. Now, there are some nonprofits who are small who need a different level of effort prior to gaining a certain level of funding. But if
Mhm.
I can see that a founder is making their vision move, I would vet them differently. I may
Mhm.
say, okay, here is what you're lacking instead of just saying no.
Yeah.
Here is where you're lacking. Here is where we would like to support you. Put this in place and come back to us.
Mhm.
Right. So then you give them an opportunity to learn without the frustration of just going after grants. Right. Or
Mm.
just, or even there are a lot of foundations that I can't even get a phone call. So if I
Yeah.
can't get a phone call, you can't, and you say you want to invest in what I do. If I can't get a phone call,
Mhm.
then how are you truly invested in what you say you are? So
That's true.
I would create staff on that side. You have the funding. So
Mhm.
you could create an opportunity for someone like me to engage,
Mhm.
right? As part of what you do. Instead of just saying, okay, you're a new nonprofit, like we can't serve you. No, you could create the opportunity for another level of your nonprofit or foundation to engage with someone like me and help me get in position.
Mhm.
So I would create those opportunities where we can help the small nonprofit actually get in a position to be a grantee for us, especially if they're serving the mission that we also value.
Right. There's alignment there. So I what I hear you saying is that the funders have the resources so they could create the space to for you guys to reach your common goal, right?
Absolutely.
Yep, I hear that. I hear that. So I want to talk a little bit more about mission fulfill 2030. So I want you to tell me because it's one thing to hear about like, yeah, this is what we do, these are activities, but I want to hear about a story of how you've changed someone's life. Because again, if you're on Gerald's LinkedIn, you'll see the pictures, you'll see the faces of the Black boys, and it's amazing. But I would love for you to talk about like how you've changed someone's life or you've helped a young Black boy.
So I had a young man. One of my friends is he's a dean at a school, and he called me and he was like, Gerald, man, I got this young brother, and he was like, if this young brother keeps going on the trajectory he is, he was like, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to look good.
Mm,
So I want you to talk to him. So we set up a Zoom. We set up a Zoom and he went to the office and I talked to him. And I basically told the brother, I was like, listen, you could be dead or you could be alive. Which
mm-hmm.
one would you rather be? Right. And he said, I want to live. I was like, well, the life that you live in is not going to lead you to being alive, right? Like
Right. That's real.
you are going, somebody is going to unalive you if you
Mm-hmm.
keep doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it created a relationship. And I asked the young man, I asked him, I said, listen, I am willing to give up time for you and talk to you weekly and help you to achieve your goals.
Mm-hmm.
And are you willing to do that? Because either you're willing or not willing. I can only help those who are willing to change.
Mm-hmm.
So the young man said yes. So we had our first meeting, and I basically was like, what's your story? I just let him talk. I just let him talk for like an hour. And once I gave him the floor, he
Mm.
opened up. He said, nobody had ever asked me that. He said,
Wow.
nobody ever asked me how I felt. Nobody ever asked me what was my point without talking.
Mm.
So after he talked, I said, hey, dude, you're not the only one. You're not the only one. Let's create you a life plan. So we start meeting week after week after week, and I would give him a goal, and he would come back, Coach Moore, done. He would come back early, like Coach Moore, done. He would text me, Coach Moore, done. The more I gave him, the more he achieved, the more he felt good about himself. By the time, by the time he was a junior, he had went from a 1 point. He had went from a point. He didn't even have a 1 point. He had a point something.
Mm.
He had went from a point something to honor roll by junior year. I met this young man as a freshman. Senior
Yes.
year, where you want to go to college, bro? What you want to major in? Now, a bigger part of it was he his family structure was broken. So he
Mm.
really had no support. And he would call me and we would talk about what was going on with his family. And I was like, yo, man, unfortunately, sometimes we have to leave our families and
Mm.
not necessarily leave them, but they have a different vision. As you're maturing as a young man, your life is your own. You are not subject to where your family is going. And I said, I totally understand because 100% of the men in my family, my father included, my father had 7 brothers. My
Mm.
mother had 6. 100% of the men in my family struggled with drug and alcohol abuse.
Wow.
How did I get through that? By the grace of God. But one of the things I knew was I had a choice. So I told his brother, you got a choice, right? Because he was like, every time I do something good, it's like my own family is attacking me for doing good. And I was like, I know, I
Mm.
was right there. But what is the vision for your life? Not
Mm.
them. What is the vision for your life? So, we went through that. Young man was able to get into college in upstate New York. He is now majoring in computer science, something he never thought that he could do. He's an honor roll
Yes.
student. And he was somebody that they were putting out of school. They was getting ready to put him out of school. And it was my story.
Mm.
And that's when my boy brought me in. He was like, yo, G, this is your story.
Whew.
Let's change this kid's life. And that's what we do. Like, it's just a matter of engagement, finding that common ground. And, sometimes when you're in school, you need somebody who is going to give it to you straight.
Mm.
There
Yeah.
were times where our 1 hour meetings didn't go so great, but he
Mm-hmm.
came back. He came back. There were times where he didn't like what I had to say, but he knew I was saying it out of love.
Mm-hmm.
I go into schools and talk to Black boys, and one of the first questions I ask them, raise your hand if somebody told you they loved you today. No
Mm,
hands go up.
mm.
No hands go up.
Wow.
Raise your hand if somebody told you they loved you this week that wasn't a so-called girlfriend. No hands go up.
Wow.
So what I realized is the bigger part of what we have to do is love our boys.
Mm,
We have to love our boys. So there's not a young man that I don't engage that he doesn't know that Coach Moore is gonna give you love. Coach Moore loves you. Come on, let's slap it up
oh my
and
God.
and let's get it. That's the biggest part
Yeah.
of it. That's the biggest part
And
because if I don't care what happens to me, and it doesn't matter what happened to me, then I can do anything to you. So if we see a young man who kills another young man in the street, it's not more so that his issue was with that other young man. He has given up on his own life and it doesn't matter anymore.
mm,
That can all change with love, right? You lead with love. So if I have value for my life, then I'll value somebody else's life. But if I have no value for my life, then I'm liable to do anything. And
that's
that's a
right.
big part of it. And that's another separator. And
Mm-hmm.
the men that work with us, I'm like, yo, this is what we got to do. Like
Yeah.
we there's a different level of being strict and loving. You can be both, right? But
Right.
we need the young men that we serve to know that we love them. This is why we're here. We're here because we love them, not because we want to be strict and we're overseers. No, 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 no. We love you because you are the future of the Black family. And I tell
Mm-hmm.
people this all the time. People, I don't know how I always get into these conversations. Well, why Black boys?
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest parts of this, Tiffany, is I have 3 daughters. The chances that my daughters can marry a man in the mold of their father is about 1%.
Mm. Make
That's
it
what
plain.
keeps me up at night,
Mm.
right? So
That's
this is
right.
for my daughters, your nieces, nephews, cousins, the young girls in your neighborhood. They should have the opportunity to marry a high-tech man if they so choose.
That's
And
right.
that's what we're building. We're
Mm.
building young men who will be community builders, good husbands and fathers at the end of the day. That's what we want to build
So much
beyond
bigger
the
than
tech
the
stuff.
program. So much bigger than just a program, right?
Absolutely.
Like
And
this, you
that's what
can
we
hear
deliver. And I can't quantify that in a grant write up.
it. Mm. Right?
I can't quantify that in a grant write up. I can't quantify that in a logic model. I can't
Right.
quantify that. I can't quantify the actual change in data. I got young men. There's a quote from the great philosopher Jadakiss from the Locks, where he's like, "Yo, I told a young man to keep the gun in his pocket, and that's good behavior to him.
Mm-hmm.
If I get a young man who I don't even know, I don't know what these young boys is doing out here sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but keeping the gun in his pocket is good behavior to him, is a start. I
Right.
gotta I gotta get him to keep the gun in his pocket before
You
I
gotta
go to the
start
next level.
somewhere.
Leave it at home,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if he can keep the gun in the pocket in the face of adversity, that's a win. And sometimes we're dealing with young men who are at that level,
Right.
right? So I can't even quantify the change in that. And you want me to write it up in a grant?
Right. So let me just say this. It was a comment said, "Don't cry, Tiff." No, I'm thinking about my nephews and my godsons. So this is so real. This is a real issue, and that's why I said um, it's so much bigger than a program. Like when you invest in organizations like Gerald, you are investing in a community. You're investing in families, and so much bigger than just a donation, just supporting a program. And that's why I wanted to create this platform so y'all can see that this is real. And a lot of times, the way we think about impact, like Gerald is saying, through, oh, we checked the box or we completed this task, when if you saw like the real life changes that are sometimes hard to quantify, you would be amazed. So I encourage you guys as you're listening today, like, think about the difference you supporting an organization like this could make in a family, in a whole community, because it's real. It's just that real. And what if, like, taking it back to Gerald's story, what if he had never encountered that young man, right? Like, what if he had never stepped into that young man's life? Imagine where he would be. So that's why we need organizations like Gerald's to change the path for these young Black boys, right? And so I want to ask you, Gerald, like, you're doing amazing work, but I'm not naive. I know it takes money. I know it takes support. And Gerald is doing this full time. Gerald quit his job to do this full time. So I just want to put it out there to you, Gerald. What is something that your nonprofit needs right now?
Um, so there's a couple things, right? So, and not even looking at infrastructure to really
Hmm.
build the infrastructure, right, is another thing. But I want to help at a level where anybody could have an impact on mission fulfilled. So we have a Changemaker 1000 campaign, and all we're asking people to do is to join our monthly campaign and give one. We're looking for 1,000 people to give $25 a month. That's it. We're asking us to take off one day of Starbucks a week. Take off one day of Starbucks a week and share with us. Like, you can't even give Starbucks for $5. So I want you to take off Starbucks one day a week and share that with us and become a change maker for Mission Fulfilled 2030. On a
I
low,
love it.
on a
I love
high
that.
level, on a foundational level, it costs $250,000 to run our certified Black Boys campaign, which is a 12-month intensive program where we help Black boys get their cybersecurity certification prior to graduating high school. So they are workforce ready, college prepared. Some of them will go to college, some of them will go into the workforce. But with this certification, they will be able to get jobs with a living wage that they can grow from, right? As a baseline. That
Hmm.
program for 50 boys is $250,000 for 12 months, $5,000 per young man, right? On a foundational level. If you're a foundation and you really want to help Mission Fulfilled, and that's not even to support our infrastructure, that's a program. But on the low level, everybody can come in and support us with $25 for our Changemaker 1000 program.
I
That's
love
it,
it.
right? And
So
it's not a heavy lift.
it's
It's
not,
not a
and it's
heavy
on the
lift at
screen
all.
for you. So y'all, this is
And
called. Oh, go
one
ahead,
more
Gerald.
thing, to
Hmm.
on a corporate sponsor level, right? So Mission Fulfilled is a high level. We want to impact 100,000 young men. Across the country, we want to get 10,000 men who are technically gifted to serve with us and support young men. On a corporate level, we want to get 1,000 companies who believe in our vision to come in, help us leverage new technology, give our young men internships, and seed into our vision, right? And as an individual, Changemaker 1000, $25.
I love it. So now it's your time, y'all. So the name of this podcast is the Nonprofit Activator, and we are moving into a segment that's called Activation Mode, where it's time for you to support, where you can help. You've heard Gerald's story, and I invite you all to support his Changemaker campaign. Or if you're a funder or a corporation listening, I invite you to reach out to Gerald to see how you can support his organization doing such great work across the country. And thank you guys for joining on LinkedIn. Also, for your comments, there's a question from Taj Thomas that I'll just point out for you, Gerald, that you guys can connect on. But I do want to lift up this space to say, y'all, if you want to make an impact, if you are tired of the constant barrage of negative news I hear all the time in my community about the gun violence, and you're looking for the solutions, you're looking a solution right in the face right now. You're listening to a solution right now. So you can support and help a young Black boy today. So I encourage you all to support him. Let's go into activation mode and let's help Mission Fulfilled 2030 reach its mission of helping 100,000 young Black boys. And it can start with something as simple as $25 today. Okay. So thank you all for activating, right? And doing your part and supporting another organization. And we're going to end. Just want to ask you, Gerald, what are your 3 pieces of advice that you would give to a nonprofit founder like you?
Three, become the thing. Become the thing. You have to have the passion to do this thing because it gets trying. Like you see this vision of this thing that you want to change, and it's not always going to be good, right? So I would say don't do it if you really don't have the passion,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can see a problem and we can try and solve it, but if you're really not interested in going all the way and solving it, don't do it and go work with someone else, right? Take your time and your vision and go work with another nonprofit who's already doing it. So that would be one. Take care of self.
Yeah.
Take care of self. Literally, Tiff, from the time this thing started, I probably work 100 hours a week. I
Yeah.
probably work 100 hours a week. There's plenty of
Believe
times where my wife comes and get me and be like, listen, it's my time now. Right?
You
Like
better
my
give
wife
her a time.
and I gave her the space. I was like, baby, listen, sometimes you are going to have to come get me because when I'm working, like I'm in the zone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I am the thing. So sometimes I'm so deeply entrenched in trying to get it and trying to make this mission work that easily 100 hours a week, unpaid,
Mm-hmm.
100 hours a week. So there's some self-care that needs to happen because we hear a lot of like I coming from the outside to the inside of the nonprofit space, we hear a lot of talk about burnout. And I've
Mm-hmm.
started to go to a lot of these different conferences to learn more. And there's a lot of talk about burnout.
Mm-hmm.
3, get people to help you.
Mm.
Get people to help you. Let people help you. Let people do their thing. Like typically when it's your baby, you want to micromanage. Give people a task and let them do it. Write some standard operate procedures so you can take some things off your plate. Please. Right? Those simple things. You can't grow if you can't do those things. You can't truly support the vision if you're not willing to let go. And I'm very fortunate in the fact that I come from a management consulting space where I learned a lot about standard operating procedures. So as I got started, I had things in place that I could give to people. Here, it's written up. If you need help, then ask me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm more than willing to let people go. Hey, if you say you want to help me, how do you want to help me? Here's how to do it. Run with it. You're gonna make mistakes. So what? We all make mistakes, but run with it. Don't micromanage. Let people do their thing. Let some volunteers come in and help you. And that way make sure they understand the vision. And some people gonna come and some people gonna go. So what? Don't micromanage. Let people help you with the vision.
Love it. Right. I hope you all were taking notes. I hope you are listening. I want to say thank you so much, Gerald, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be my very first live recording of the Nonprofit Activator podcast. Thank you guys for listening and watching live on LinkedIn. I will be doing this every month, and I will be lifting up the stories of nonprofit founders who are doing the work right now in real time. They are making change right now. And I want you all to realize like they are the solution that you're looking for and they need your support. So thank you guys so much. And we will see you next month. Thanks, Gerald.
Thanks everybody for participating. Thank you, Tiffany. The show is gonna be awesome. And thank you for everything that you're doing for us micro, small nonprofits, less than $1 million, says Mackenzie Scott.
All right, let's go. We're going to change that.
Mackenzie, let's talk. Let's talk.
That's right. All right. Thanks, Gerald.
Thanks, Tiff.
Bye.